Hi, I'm Andrew Wasson. Thanks for joining me for my weekly guitar blog. It's April 28th, 2013, and this week we're going to cover composing melody without a guitar. Now, this question was sent in from James C. He's in Portland, Oregon, and he wrote in with this email to me. I was wondering if you might be able to demonstrate exactly how someone could compose a melody over a set of chord changes, but do so without using an instrument. I have heard of this being done, but if there was a way that you could make a video lesson actually showing something like this, that would be great. To actually see the step-by-step would be really awesome. From James C. in Portland, Oregon, USA. Well, hey, thanks for writing in, James. This is going to be a fun video since you'll actually get to follow along with me as I compose a melody on screen against a pre-established chord progression using nothing but general key signature theory and a whole lot of guesswork. So let's just jump into this idea. We'll have some fun and do some very creative composing without an instrument in our hands, and we'll see exactly what we can come up with.
Well, before we are able to get started with composing a melody to a set of pre-established chord changes, we're going to obviously need those chord changes to get started with initially. So let's just quickly establish a key, and then using some basic music theory principles come up with some kind of diatonic chord progression in that key. So let's just for the heck of it, let's just use the first key in finale that comes up, which is G major. So we've established the key signature now for G major, and we'll start plugging in the chords next. So well, let's just keep it simple, and for the first chord, let's just start out on a G major chord, and then maybe for the second chord, let's shoot over to the fifth of the key, which is a D chord, and then maybe we'll go to the subdominant chord family and grab an A minor, the 2 chord of the key, and we'll stay in subdominant, and we'll go with the 4 chord of C next. Okay, maybe in measure 5 we'll head back to the tonic chord again. That should sound quite nice after that C, and then after that we'll stay in the same chord family, and we'll go with a B minor after that G major. That'll sound quite nice, and perhaps even on the next measure as well, we'll stick in the same chord family again with a 6th chord of E minor. That should also be quite interesting. I'm just looking back at measure 6 here, because after the G major chord in line 1, we went to the D major chord, and B minor is actually a relative minor to that chord, so that should sound quite nice. And then of course staying in the same chord family, the tonic chord family, having the 1 and then the 3 and then the 6 come up after that. That should sound pretty good. We'll wrap up on the dominant chord family, D chord, to have a nice strong pull back to the top of the progression. So now that we've completed our set of chord changes, I think what I'll do for the chart here is, instead of leaving all those whole rests, I'll just put a slash notation into the chart there, so it makes it look like a real rhythm guitar piece. And now that we've established this, let's head over to the guitar and actually strum this thing down and find out what this sounds like.
So let's jam out on this set of chord changes from the key of G major, which will act as our backing set of chords to produce a melody from. And let's just get right into it and find out what this chord progression sounds like. Here we go.
Well, now that we have our pre-established chord changes and we're quite happy with them, the next step with this is to basically begin working on our melody that we're going to establish. So the next thing we're going to do is try to figure out, using some chord tone analysis and a little bit of information about our scale and some thought about rhythm, how we're going to maybe move through some melodies that can operate quite nicely on these chords and do it all without an instrument. So let's start with chord tones. On our first chord here in measure 1, we've got a G major chord, so the chord tones for that chord will be G, B, and D. Now we could also think a little bit past that into the 7th of F sharp if we wanted to go that high, but usually if it's not a 7th chord, you're kind of stretching it a bit to go up that high. So we're going to stick with just G, B, and D, and we're going to think about the scale itself a little bit as passing tones, and of course we're going to concentrate somewhat on rhythm, but let's keep the rhythms pretty simple. I think what I'm going to start with is just 8th notes, and I'm going to maybe go with a chord tone. In the beginning here, we'll take a D and perhaps move upwards from there to an E, and we'll just try dropping back down. And at that point, since we've played up and down the scale some, let's maybe finally go into the root of the chord. Maybe what we'll do is let that sustain a little bit. So we'll just hit one more G in that measure, and now we have this series of 8th notes going D, E, D, down to the G, and then staying put on that note. Let's go to the next chord now. It's a D major in the next measure, and D major chords have the notes of D, F sharp, and A in them. And maybe we'll stick with another 5th. We chose a D on the G chord, so that was the 5th of that chord. Let's do that same move on the D chord here. So we'll go with A. We'll move into a chord tone underneath there after that. So we'll grab that F sharp. We'll move in the same manner that we had in the first measure. Why don't we try that? A, F sharp, back to the A, and then maybe we'll do the same thing that we did before. We'll head into the root of the chord. We'll put the D next. You see the contour of the line has kind of flipped around. What was above on the staff, now we have below, and what was below on the staff, we now have above. So we kind of change things around a bit. Now, speaking of changing things around, let's perhaps go into a little bit different rhythm. I'm going to, on that 3rd beat, I'm going to grab a dotted quarter note. I'll go with the D again, because that's what we had done in that first measure. We targeted that first chord tone of G there, the root of the chord. So let's go with D again here, and maybe just grab an 8th note at the end of that measure and head over next into our A minor. So this should, just by looking at it, this should sound quite concise, and it should work just fine. Now on our A minor chord that's coming up next here, I think we'll just begin differently here. Maybe we'll go with the 3rd. We'll go with a C note, and we'll break loose into a scale tone here and go into a B. So we'll go off of the C downward to a B note. The A, C, and E notes are the chord tones, so maybe we should come back to perhaps not a root. Maybe let's do something with rhythm too. Let's go to a quarter note tied. Let's try something like that. Back to our C, and we'll tie that to an 8th. So we'll have C sustaining a little bit there, and then we'll move up to the 5th of that chord. So an E, and perhaps now let's go with a scale tone. Let's go up to the F. We'll just carry on. Well, actually, let's carry on right through the scale. So we'll have the E, F, G, wrapping that measure up. Now, G is a good one, actually. You know what, that comes to mind too. We can tie that over perhaps into that next measure, because G is a chord tone. So there's some anticipation on the chord tone targeting there. And maybe we'll hang on that note. We'll go to a quarter note and sort of hang loose on that tone into that measure, and maybe just drop through the scale a bit from there. We'll go to an F. We'll try skipping a note now, going to D, and perhaps we'll see what it sounds like, because a D is going to be a 5th of a G chord coming up, and D is also a very interesting note on the C chord. If you've ever experimented with that, that would be the 2nd degree or the 9th. So here now we have completed our first line. I have no idea really what this is going to sound like. It looks like it's going to make quite a bit of sense, but let's take it to the guitar and listen to it and find out for sure. I'm kind of wondering about this D note that we chose at the end there, but what I can always do is, if this note somewhat clashes with just the regular C triad on that 3rd beat, I can always convert the C triad over to a C add 2 chord, and that'll cover that. And that would make it sound fine. So let's do some experimenting over on the guitar and just find out what this sounds like when you play it.
Okay, now let's have a run through the first 4 measures of my melody that I composed without an instrument, and we'll just find out how it sounds performed under the set of pre-established chords that we produced in the key of G major in a moment. But the first thing we're going to do is just play it on its own, find out how it stands alone. Here we go. So it doesn't sound too bad sitting on its own. I think the next thing we should do is listen to it with the drum loop and all the chord changes behind it and find out how it all fits together.
Okay, let's carry on with the development of this melody. Now, we had left off in measure 4 on a D note, so I guess the next thing to do is to move into the world of this G major chord and look at the chord tones. Of course, that's going to be G, B, and D. We had left off on a D note on the previous measure, so I think what I'd like to do is begin again on a D note. There was a D that started our previous line, and I think what I'm going to try to do is on this G chord, I'm going to fashion the line in a similar rhythmic structure, except this time I think I'm going to descend through the notes. So we'll go down D to the C, we'll have a B. Just for the heck of it, I think we'll skip the A, we'll head to a G note there, and then have the G come back again, just in the same fashion as we had on the last time we saw G major. So that should sound really good. We're starting on a chord tone and we are ending on a chord tone, so that's cool. Well, root actually, so that's pretty cool. So that should sound just fine. Let's move next to the B minor chord. B minor chord has the notes of B, D, and F sharp in it. I'm just looking across this melody and the rhythm for it so far, and we have not used up to this point any 16th notes, so I think I'd like to try a 16th note run. I'm going to come from the chord tone of a 5th, and we've had good luck starting on 5ths. We have a lot of phrases off the 5th chord tone. So we're going to start off of 5th, and I think we'll just go right up the scale with a series of 16th notes from F sharp up to the B root. From there, maybe I'll flip over to 8th notes and just kind of grab some random tones here. We'll have a C, and we'll jump back up to that 5th chord tone. I'm noticing off of the D major in measure 2, because we're coming off of the G chord again, this time going into the relative minor of B minor chord, I'm going to fashion the line maybe a little bit similar there. So I think what I'll do is I'll grab another dotted quarter and we'll go to a D, the 3rd of the B minor chord, and then maybe from there we'll have a C note roll into the B off of the E minor chords measure. So the B is the 5th again. I'm really going crazy on starting these lines with 5ths, but they seem to worked out okay with the first line, so we'll keep carrying on that way. Maybe off that 5th we'll jump right to a root and maybe wrap the phrase with a little bit longer rhythm structure and have a quarter note come in on the B again, so we have this contour of B, E, B. Another thing we haven't done at this point is use any chord structures. So let's do some 2-note chord structures with this piece. I think at the end here maybe it might be fun to do some 6th intervals. I'll go off of the B again and we'll do a 6th interval from a B, which is the 5th of the E minor chord, into the G, which is the 3rd of that chord. Maybe we'll strike that chord again and sustain it, because that's going to sound really good. Those are strong chord tones, so that's going to sound really cool. Let's get another 8th note to wrap that line off to lead us over to the D chord. I think we can still use some chord tones here. We could use the 3rd and the root to push us nicely over into the D. I think we're going to wrap up on that D chord. Maybe we'll just do a whole note to wrap the line up, and we'll use the same 6th chord interval. We'll have an A and an F sharp, so that'll be our 5th and our 3rd. So that should sound really nice. This would actually sound excellent if someone was strumming. You know, if we had a second guitar part or a piano part, shooting the chord harmony out in the background. That should sound really good. So there you go. Now here's our second line of melody. Let's go to the instrument and just find out what this melodic statement sounds like.
Now, just before we put everything together and get an idea of how well the entire complete melody operates under this set of pre-established chord changes we have, I think it's a good time to just mention a few things. First of all, starting out with, it's important to keep in mind that nothing you compose by ear is set into stone in any manner, and if there are lines that you just don't really think sound all that spectacular, it's perfectly fine to go back in and change them later. The cool thing, however, is that over time and in doing this a lot, once you mess around with composing this way for quite some time now, you'll really get a solid idea of what works ahead of time, and you'll be able to hear things better in your head, and you get also an idea of what probably doesn't work very well, and you'll notice things faster, and it'll just become an easier process for you and all. So in the beginning, while it might be a real guessing game, after some time you'd actually get fairly good at doing this type of writing style and using these writing techniques. Anyway, let's put everything together. Let's play the whole 8-bar phrase underneath all the chord changes with the drum loop and just find out how this entire thing is going to come together in the end. Well, creating melodic ideas against a set of pre-established chord changes without the use of a musical instrument in your hands is obviously a whole lot of guesswork. However, it sure helps if you're aware of a few musical concepts, such as things like understanding key signatures, being fully aware of chord tones. That helps a lot. And if you know how the reactions of scale tones occur against the chords being used in a harmony, well, that's obviously extremely helpful also. And on the other side of all this stuff is rhythm. Knowing how to relate the rhythmic contour of each of your melodic lines by ear alone, and being at least somewhat clear in your mind as to how they will ebb and flow rhythmically will certainly help a great deal when it comes to the rhythmic elements of your melody. As you've seen when I was building the example melody, the rhythm structures operate extremely well and also balance themselves in a more connected manner if they are more similar rather than as if they are differently arranged. So keep all of these ideas in mind, and most certainly try doing this exercise at home. It's a lot of fun, and it's also interesting for a process of practice for your ears as well. Anyway, that's about all the time I have for today. As always, thanks for watching. Have fun working on all of this information. Have a great week, and I'll catch up with you next time. Bye for now.